we are now in closed session. Okay, colleagues, settle down. Thank you. I would like to invite the STUC Treasurer, Harry Donaldson, to give the Treasurer's report. Thanks, Harry.
President, Congress, now you're already told at the start that the tellers are there to ensure that people can't get in. I'm led to believe it's so you can't get out, actually, but that may well be the reality. Thank you, President. Congress, we have two separate financial statements which I would wish to present to you. The financial statements for the STUC and the abbreviated accounts for STUC Training Limited for the year ending 31st of December 2014. Although the accounts are separate, in order to reflect the STUC's overall financial position over the year, they need to be looked at together. As you will see, across the two sets of accounts, there is an overall surplus of £4,300. This is effectively a break-even position and was achieved despite a projected budget deficit. This better than projected position was achieved in the main because of a substantial increase in income generated by the conference facilities within the STUC building. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of those affiliates who use the centre for meetings and conferences and to encourage you to continue to do so. We've also made savings in our operational staff, in part by redistributing tasks carried out by a retired colleague. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Thomson's solicitors for the increased financial contributions made to the core resources of the STUC. This not only enables us to take forward important issues such as access to justice, employment rights advice, and contributes to the delivery of the wider work of Congress, including a key role in the Better Than Zero campaign we heard about yesterday. Although we've been very successful in accessing external sources of funding, principally to support our skills and learning and some of our equality work, it is affiliation fees paid by unions themselves that funds the core work of the STUC and the implementation of many important decisions that you, the Congress, will take this week. The fee for 2015 set by the formula is £1.33, a 1 pence increase from last year. Unfortunately, although some unions have maintained and in indeed some cases increased their membership for yet another year, there has been a further significant reduction in total membership numbers of over 21,000. Overall income from affiliation fees has fallen for the first time in several decades, leaving the STUC with considerable financial challenges to face in the period ahead. Although funding from the Scottish Government for a number of STUC projects has been continued at the same level for the forthcoming year, and as we've heard this morning, will be increased, this of course means a reduction in real terms, putting significant pressure on these projects to continue to deliver effectively. And it would seem very unlikely that the trend in membership and external funding, project funding, will improve in the immediate future. Congress, the General Council, is committed to securing the STUC's long-term financial stability and will continue to put in place measures to reduce costs and to increase the income. The outcome of the discussions currently taking place with the TUC and with affiliates on the balance of resources available to both trade union centres will have a significant impact on the future finances of the STUC and ability of the General Council to meet the demands placed on it by affiliates and by the decisions obviously taken by this Congress. We expect these discussions to produce firm recommendations by the summer, which will provide welcome clarity on the future financial position of the STUC and the decisions of the General Council which we will be required to take. Congress, it has been another challenging year, and there is nothing on the horizon at all that leads me to believe that future challenges will be of a smaller magnitude, indeed quite the opposite in fact. The reduction in affiliation fees, income and the General Council's desire to continue to deliver an effective response to the political and industrial challenges we face means that the General Council has had to set a deficit budget for 2015. It has done so with full confidence that it can produce a better than projected outturn and that the organisation has sufficient reserves available to finance any deficit that may occur. While we are able to sustain some small deficits, year-on-year deficits will not be acceptable. There may be difficult decisions ahead which, if we take them based on our broader values of unity, solidarity and cooperation, it will stand us in good stead. Congress, on behalf of the General Council, I move the Treasurer's report and invite Congress to approve the financial statements for 2014. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Does anyone have any questions on the Treasurer's report? Okay. Do you agree with the report? Thank you very much. I'm now going to take motion 1, and it's the motion to amend the Constitution, and I call on Harry Donaldson to move this motion and Pat Rafferty to second.
President, Conference. Harry Donaldson moving the motion to amend the STUC Constitution. Congress, the demands on the STUC have grown significantly since devolution and show every sign of continuing to increase in the future. There are now so many more opportunities to influence policy through, for instance, government and parliamentary inquiries and consultations. The STUC's constructive engagement with the Scottish Government also opens up numerous opportunities to pursue the best interests of Scottish workers through membership of working groups and task forces and ongoing liaison with senior officials across government departments. And of course, every year this Congress renews and extends the trade union campaigning and policy agenda in Scotland. This is hardly unreasonable. It's the purpose of this event, but it means the demands and expectations on the STUC continue to accumulate year on year. The pressure has been particularly acute over the past couple of years, as the STUC has sought to ensure, I would argue successfully, that the voice of Scotland's workers was firmly at the heart of the constitutional debate. The new powers being delivered to the Scottish Parliament through the Smith Commission are only factor-driven and an ever-increasing workload. Others will be the ongoing state of the economy and labour market and the new institutions, such as the Fair Work Commission being developed at Scottish level. It would have been irresponsible for the General Council to avoid addressing the potential impact of these growing demands on the future viability of the organisation. Therefore, despite the obvious difficulties and potential sensitivities, it decided to undertake a comprehensive review of the STUC's organisational effectiveness to ensure it has the capability to meet the immediate and long-term challenges we face. To address how the STUC should respond to these challenges, the General Council prepared a discussion paper, Prepared for the Future, which it initially circulated to affiliates in February 2014. The paper addresses the impact of devolution on the trade union movement in Scotland, and the STUC in particular, in the context of the anticipated transfer of further powers from Westminster to Holyrood. While fully acknowledging the challenges faced by the STUC's affiliate unions in meeting the demands of their own members in the current economic and political environment, the General Council took the view that there is a strong case to be made for a substantial increase in the financial contributions made by affiliates to the STUC. However, the General Council recognised the most appropriate approach to determining the future funding of the STUC was to consider the balance of funding between Britain's two trade union centres, the STUC and the TUC, and to progress this through dialogue with the affiliates and the General Councils of both organisations. Discussions with the TUC commenced in November 2014 and are still ongoing, continuing. It is anticipated that this will result in a decision about the future arrangements for setting the STUC affiliation fees being reached prior to the 2016 Congress. As you know, the STUC Constitution contains provision for setting the STUC affiliation fee through a weighted formula. The motion to amend the Constitution proposed by the General Council is intended to provide the necessary flexibility to allow the General Council the facility to set the STUC's affiliation fees for 2016, to implement the outcome of the discussions with the TUC and their respective affiliates. If decisions on the future arrangements for setting the affiliation fees are left until 2016 Congress, the earliest any change would come into effect would be 2017. Congress, I want to emphasise, for the avoidance of any doubt whatsoever, the change to the Constitution proposed by the General Council is neither intended to preempt the outcome of discussions with the TUC or be dependent upon the outcome of these discussions. The General Council is well aware of the financial challenges faced by its affiliates and recognises that a change in the balance of funding between the Britain's trade union centres will not result in an increase in the total amount contributed by affiliates to both organisations. Congress, this motion is simply intended to give the General Council the flexibility it requires to respond swiftly to the outcome of our current discussions with the TUC, whatever the outcome may be. It will give the STUC General Council some flexibility currently available to the TUC by bringing the STUC's constitution into line with that of the TUC. That we believe that to be entirely fair, and to do otherwise cannot be justified. We have much work to do and we have many opportunities to exploit. The General Council wants to get on with the job of delivering on the decisions and demands of this Congress and the demands that you make when you pass each and every resolution. Congress, please support the motion.
Thanks, Harry. Pat.
Congress, as Harry has already mentioned, there are significant opportunities facing the trade union movement in Scotland, as well as profound challenges. If the movement is to make the best of the Fair Work Convention, if we are to influence the direction of economic development and ensure that the fruits of that development are fairly distributed, then the movement has to ensure that the STUC, Scotland's trade union centre and social partner, is adequately resourced. A strong trade union centre is essential to drive forward a coherent trade union response to the political and industrial agendas which grows more difficult and complex with every passing week. As we have already discussed at this Congress, the current and emerging political challenges are acute. The Tories have signalled their intent to end trade unionism as we understand it today, to prevent unions from taking strike action and make workplace organisation as practically difficult as possible. We know what's coming if the Tories form the next government. In Scotland, the challenges are of a different kind, more about ensuring the significant new powers accruing to the Scottish Parliament are used in the interest of working people. If the trade union movement isn't at the forefront of developing policies related to these new powers, you can be assured that others, progressive corporate interests, will be only too happy to fill that gap. As economies across the developed world still struggle to return to normality after the great financial crisis and the trends in automation threaten secure employment, the industrial agenda is looking no less fraught. Therefore, it is important to remind ourselves that the STUC is currently engaged in promoting the trade union industrial agenda on many fronts. More than any other civic organisation, the STUC has made evidence-based, detailed case for reindustrialisation, helping secure current and future manufacturing jobs. The impact on the Scottish Government policy and priorities is clear. The STUC is already supporting the joint activity of trade unions across the economy. In public services where workers have taken the brunt of the coalition's ideological attacks, in the energy sector where the extent of the challenge is highlighted by the impact on jobs on the North Sea due to the falling price of oil and proposals to close the Long Gannet. In the transport sector, where unions are currently trying to secure jobs, pensions, terms and conditions in the face of competitive tendering of the Clyde and Hebrides Lifeline ferry services. And on the railways, where the ridiculous privatised system wastes public money and sometimes threatens the security and continuity of employment. And in other industrial sectors like defence, arts and culture. There is no other organisation in Scotland pursuing the trade union industrial agenda. Without a strong trade union centre to drive it forward, workers across Scotland will have fewer and worse employment opportunities. With its Adjust Scotland initiative, the STUC proved throughout the referendum campaign and beyond that it can rise to the challenge and ensure that the priorities of the movement are firmly on the political agenda. This constitutional amendment will help give the STUC the flexibility to respond to the profound challenges and opportunities I've just described, and to do so as effectively as we did in contributing to the constitutional debate. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you, Pat. Is there anything else you want to bring?
Speech again. President, sisters, brothers, Manuel Cortez, Transport Salaried Staff Association. Actually standing here with a very heavy heart, but an incredibly clear head. Because I've just heard what the proposer and the seconder of the motion have said. And I have to say I agree, absolutely agree with everything that Pat has just told us. Because as a union, as everybody else in this hall, we are proud to be affiliated to this body. But this has got nothing to do about whether we feel proud of the work that they do or we want them to do more work. You just heard what Harry said. He actually said, and I'm sure he'll come back if he's got a right to reply and maybe clarify it, that this was not dependent, this change was not dependent on whether or not they got an agreement with the TUC. But in the same breath, he also said that clearly there will be a balance between the expenditure within the two centres. In your parlance and mine, that means there'll be no increase, overall increase in what we pay. You know, I am concerned, and I'm sure many of you will be concerned by this. You are all negotiators. We've got a hall full of negotiators. And we are being told today to sign up to a constitutional change when we don't know what the outcome of those negotiations are. I am sure that none of you would go back and recommend something to your members without having looked at the fine print. Because as I say, and rightly so, the devil is always in the detail. You know, Congress, we can wait until those negotiations have gone through. And then they can come back and tell us exactly what is being expected. Because I tell you, the elephant in the room that no one has mentioned is what happens if there is no agreement. Yes, everybody has good intentions. Everybody wants to get an agreement. But what happens if you don't get it? What happens then? Because they've already changed the Constitution. Is the STUC unilaterally going to change those contributions? I think they should tell us what will happen then. And I heard carefully, and I go back to what Harry said, that this was not predated. It was not dependent on whether or not they got an agreement with the TUC. You know, we're all part of a movement, but we all know as well that sometimes we disagree with each other. It's not a given right that we will get agreement. And the question that you need to ask yourselves is, why change something? A, before you know whether or not there is agreement, and B, what the detail of that agreement is. I will urge you very strongly to consider that before you vote. Don't give a blank check to anybody, not to the trusted STUC General Council, but to nobody else. You wouldn't do it on behalf of your members. Don't do it here today. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. Is there anyone else? Well, if there's anyone else who wants to take part, can you come to the front now, please? Thank you.
Colleagues, Paul McGarry, South Lanarkshire Trade Union Council. I respect the previous speakers in relation to what he had to say. But I'll tell you this, as an ex-president, and what type of work we are facing in relation to what we expect from the General Council, it's phenomenal. That doesn't come because of the fact that we're going to rejig the question of additional work put onto the Secretariat. If you want a first-class service, you've got to pay for it. And I'll tell you this, I've got every trust and confidence in the General Council that they will not pull the wool over anyone's eyes. It's the most democratic organisation with transparency at its heart. The question of the constitutional amendment is vitally important for the future of this movement. The STUC is an independent organisation. Yes, there's a relationship with the TUC, but I'll tell you this, if you do not vote for this constitution, we can kiss goodbye to the role and function of a trade union movement in Scotland. We need to give the General Council the confidence, the ability to deal with a constitutional amendment, and if it fails, then the actual wording in relation to the contribution rate will still be in place. So I'll tell you this, if there's some doubt in people's mind, then I would urge you to remove that doubt. Pass this constitutional amendment. There's been an explanation given by both speakers, and I've got every trust and confidence that that will occur.
Thanks, Phil. Anybody else? Okay, Harry, would you like to write a reply?
Thanks, Chair Congress. Speaking as the elephant in the room today, it may well be in response to Manuel. The issue was that this whole issue was to allow the flexibility, as we'd said. And the issue there is that, it's already been said here at the rostrum that the issue was we required the ability to have the flexibility, that we could not continue the way we were. The demands were so pressing on the STUC. This is not about a blank cheque. And if anybody knows me, it would stay blank anyway. So I can assure you the issue in terms of that is your money is safe in our hands, as they say. So again, the issue there is, while I respect Manuel's concerns, it's there. It may well be that the issue that, the same question might want to be asked to our colleagues at TUC level also. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. I'm now going to go to the vote. General Council are supporting this motion. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Congress has been asked to adopt the General Council's report on effective organisation, Chapter 1, pages 9 to 17. Does Congress agree the General Council report section on effective organisation? Okay, moving swiftly. The private session is now at an end. Tellers can open the doors, and all observers, visitors and guests are now welcome back into the hall. Thank you. Right, conference, settle down. I'm going to call on Mary Senior to move Emergency Composite A and Gable Removal Centre on behalf of the General Council.
Thanks, President. Mary Senior moving Emergency Composite A, Dungavel Removal Centre on behalf of the General Council. Congress, recent reports from Dungavel suggest people living there have been participating in a coordinated protest about their treatment within the asylum system. Some reports suggest that there have been on hunger strike after a recent Channel 4 documentary highlighted failings within the system of detention. The STUC, along with the Church of Scotland, the Catholic Church, the Muslim Council of Britain and the Scottish Refugee Council, wrote to the Dungavel Centre manager and the Home Office to request a meeting with Dungavel inhabitants. We wanted to establish what was happening within the centre and to understand the effect that detention is having on people within the asylum system. Despite the centre manager being supportive of such a visit, the Home Office denied the request. In a letter to the STUC on the 9th of April, the Home Office stated that there was no hunger strike taking place and that there was no requirement for civic society organisations to enter the centre, as it is regularly inspected by a variety of agencies. From discussions with the centre manager and with the community trade union which represents centre staff, we know that some people in Dungavel were refusing food from the canteen, but the centre manager did believe that they were eating food available in the centre shop. However, journalists investigating the situation are clear that many of those detained at Dungavel are unhappy with their treatment within the centre, but these grievances focus primarily on the effects of the asylum system itself. Congress, people in Dungavel are being held for an indefinite amount of time and are often transferred to Dungavel from Yarlswood in London, so their friends and family are often far away. The effect this has on the mental health and the well-being of people there is severe. Make no mistake, detention is a blight on our asylum system. People being held indefinitely in Dungavel have committed no crime. They've caused no harm in our country and seek nothing but the opportunity to live in safety and with dignity. Congress, how can we stand back and allow our government to treat vulnerable people in this way? They say it's okay because there's an inspection regime around it, but that inspection regime does not ask what effect indefinite detention has on the person who's detained there. In fact, the system doesn't see a person at all. It only looks at a set of criteria, a number, a set of immigration statistics. Congress, our movement has a proud record of standing up to a barbaric and inhuman immigration system in the UK. A system that treats people fleeing poverty, civil war and genocide as criminals. A system that imprisons men, women and children. But Congress, the very sad reality of our campaigning work is that whilst children have not been incarcerated in Dungavel for a good number of years, instead they're often shipped to Yarlswood and imprisoned there, or families are separated. It's for these reasons this composite calls for the closure of all detention centres across the UK and the end to the imprisonment of asylum seekers. We believe that asylum seekers should be allowed to stay within the community whilst their cases are heard and any appeals are processed. Congress, we do recognise, however, that staff working in detention centres are not to blame for the problems within the system. Staff do their best to provide a supportive environment for people under their care. We would therefore also fight for the rights of staff to be properly supported and redeployed into new roles when detention centres they work in close. Congress, we are told that Dungavel is not a prison, yet people that stay there say they feel imprisoned. When I visited Dungavel as part of the STUC Women's Committee delegation over 10 years ago, I saw the barbed wire perimeter fence that encircles Dungavel. It's not a crime to seek asylum. It's not a crime to want a new and better life for yourself and for your family. Congress, we need to build an immigration system that recognises the people within it, that has some humanity to it, and that offers compassion to people fleeing war, poverty and violence. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you, Mary. I've asked the time to accept and can ask community and Indians want to contribute down to the front. Thank you.
We're aware that this is an emergency motion and there's time constraints conference, so we would just like to formally second but take a moment of your time to draw attention to the aspect of the motion that talks about a mass demonstration on Saturday the 30th of May. We very much welcome the role that the STUC play in bringing together not only the trade union movement but wider Civic Scotland. And we think that this is a fantastic opportunity to show publicly and to make demands of our Scottish politicians that this is simply unacceptable and inhumane.
Thank you. Community.
President, Congress, Tiffany Gillis, Community Union. Conference. In principle, Community Union are in support of this emergency composite. However, it is important that Congress considers some important facts. At present, approximately half of Dungaville's population are ex-foreign national prisoners. These people have served prison sentences in Scotland and the UK for quite hideous crimes, inclusive of murder and serious assaults. And now, having served their sentences, they await deportation. We must consider, if Dungaville is to close, then where would these people go? Finally, as the composite refers, it is paramount that we must consider our large membership at Dungaville and ensure that our members' future employment opportunities are secured via suitable redeployment structures for any future campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. Is there anyone else before we to vote? Okay, General Councillor supporting. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried. I'm now going to move back to motions 19 and 20. And can I call back to move motion 19? And then call a seconder to come to the front as well, please. Thanks.
Comrades, thank you for the time here. This motion, as you can see, is about broadcasting. Broadcasting is an extremely important and influential part of our society. And BEC2 continues to represent our members to the best of its abilities, but we all know that possibly the most influential broadcasting in the United Kingdom is provided by the BBC. The BBC is proposing to take its production, its television production, and put it into a separate section of the BBC. This is the precursor to privatisation. We have been here before. Within the BBC, resources was channelled off as a separate section of the BBC, not, fortunately, within Scotland. It was then sold off. Outside broadcasting became a function that was supplied by another company. And a few years down the line, former BBC employees were told, "We now have no contract anymore with the BBC. There's your books." That is what happens when we split up the broadcasting of the public sector. Public service broadcasting has a long tradition in the United Kingdom, and it should not be subjected to the rampant effects of markets. However, this has been happening in recent years. Increasingly, television broadcasting has been opened up to so-called independent broadcasting. This hasn't resulted in swarms of small independent companies supplying television programs. It has resulted in the agglomeration of a select few so-called independent companies. The result is that the market for broadcasting in television in the United Kingdom is essentially in the hands of a few companies and a few people. What you watch at home is influenced by a small number of people. In effect, what happens then is that something like the BBC, which is your public service broadcaster, cannot compete. The BBC is in a position where, for example, the BBC channel BBC 3 has a budget of £25 million. Sounds like a lot of money.
But for a whole channel, that is very limited. In fact, it's so limited that the BBC has decided to move BBC Three entirely online, away from broadcast. By contrast, a recent drama production by Sky also had a budget of £25 million. That drama had 476,000 viewers. BBC Three got viewers of 1.3 million a week. Contrast that. That's where public service broadcasting is going. The budgets are being squeezed. The problem is here that BBC managers want to introduce more market accessibility. The head of BBC Television has decided that they need more investment. They need to go back to markets. Why? Because the people producing within the BBC aren't good enough. Who's the manager? The head of BBC, the director of television, the very same person. So we're talking about a small group of people here making decisions that are going to affect everything that you watch. And this is increasingly becoming the case as broadcasting is laid open to the so-called market. Markets, comrades, are just another way of social organisation. And if you fall into their grasp, they will squeeze very tight. The reason is that for the markets, they don't care what happens in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. For public service broadcasting, these are important. For markets, it's this year's accounts that matter. So there's our problem. Increasingly, the BBC is being squeezed and being pushed into dependence on a private sector. So, happily Liberson or Nadi, and please support the motion.
Thank you, colleagues. Do you have a seconder?
Hello, Katrina Miller for UCU, and this is my first time at Congress. My day job is as a lecturer in media and journalism, and about 70% of our graduates go into work in the industry, many of them in the BBC. The problem is that increasingly the media environment is dominated by these mega transnational corporations, such as News International, Sky, Bertelsmann, Disney, and the like. In fact, US firm Viacom now owns Channel 5. The importance of the indies, or the independent production companies, is just that they are supposed to be independent production firms, without which media production would be increasingly Hollywood blockbusters or increasingly formulaic output and nothing more. The BBC is the gold standard in terms of media production, because unlike other big corporations, there is a measure of democratic input with audience councils, the trust and the like. This new proposal is to form a commercial arm to compete not against the mega corporations really, but against the Scottish independents. The BBC perhaps do need to position themselves as a global operator. They are probably the only British company which can. But this is not the way to do it. It's a move that will inevitably end up by hoovering up the remaining indies in the Scottish industry and undermining diversity in the sector. The creative and cultural industries in Scotland are crucial for our future, and the BBC need to continue to play a key role in this, but not through further privatisation and acting like the type of companies which have led to the dumbing down of broadcasting worldwide. We do still influence the BBC, so we can do something about this. Please help us by supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Is there anyone else wishing to join the debate? Okay, we'll move to the vote then. General Council supporting. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Moving now on to amended motion 20, the value of Scotland's heritage, to move by Prospect, and to PCS to second. Can you make the way forward, please? Thank you.
Chair, Congress, Clive Davey, Prospect, moving motion 20. Congress, at UK level, heritage-based tourism makes a huge contribution to the economy. Once indirect effects are accounted for, the UK's heritage-based tourism economy is estimated to represent 26.4 billion in GDP and more than 742,000 employees. An HLF Commission survey in 2013 concluded that even though the UK and the European economy have underperformed relative to other parts of the world since the financial crisis ended, the total impact on the heritage tourism industry has still risen compared to before the crisis. The Scottish Government describes the tourism sector as being of vital importance to the Scottish economy, generating 10 billion of economic activity in the wider Scottish supply chain and contributes 5 billion and just under 5% of Scottish GDP. Employment in the tourism-related industries accounts for around 8.5% of employment in Scotland. But why talk about tourism when this motion is about Scotland's heritage sector? The answer is simple. The Scotland Visitor Survey in 2011-12 found people visit Scotland for the scenery and landscape, familiarity with the country, a desire to learn about Scottish history and culture and family connections. Around half of the visitors to Scotland took part in sightseeing, trying local food, visiting historic houses, castles, shopping and taking short walks. Visiting galleries and museums improves not only people's sense of well-being but delivers tangible benefits in their health and satisfaction with life. In short, heritage and culture is the heart of people's desire to visit our country. In 2013, a speech by Fiona Hislop, the Scottish Government's Minister for Culture and External Affairs, said the Scottish Government already accepted the case for government support for the culture sector. She said, I quote, "We actively support the case for public subsidiary of the arts. We understand the culture and heritage have a value in of themselves. I don't need or want the culture or heritage sector to make a new economic or social case to justify public support for their work. Yet budgets have continued to fall or at best flatline, and almost all the heritage bodies under the Scottish Government's authority have trimmed activity and workforces throughout the years of austerity. They are creaking, Congress. Remaining staff are overloaded. Work has not reduced in line with staff cuts. Moral is at rock bottom, along with the rest of the public sector. Curators, conservators, archaeologists, ecologists, and everyone else involved in the heritage sector bodies are left feeling unappreciated, undervalued, and disillusioned. Continued pay restraints means the organisations are increasingly struggling to recruit and replace staff. Critical decisions are being made to close historic buildings to the public, close wings in galleries or entire museums, close valued recreation sites, and choose between essential maintenance, delivering statutory functions, and paying people fair wages for their work they do. The situation is simply not sustainable, Congress. The Scottish Government needs to put its money where its mouth is and invest in all aspects of Scotland's natural culture and heritage to secure the economic, health and social inclusion returns that research predict will result. That is what Prospect's motion is calling for, and that is what Scotland needs and that is what we are asking you to support. Congress, I move.
Thank you, colleagues. Seconder.
President, Congress. Brian Carroll, PCS Union, supporting amended motion number 20. I was hoping Nicola Sturgeon was going to be here to hear this today, because this goes to the heart of what she was saying about fairness to the workforce in the public sector and elsewhere in Scotland. The SNP, and in particular Nicola Sturgeon, have been making statements about fighting austerity that any trade unionists would sign up to. The Scottish Government have taken a different stance to Westminster on issues like a no compulsory redundancy guarantee for Scottish civil servants, the living wage and less privatisation of vital public services. All of these have been welcomed by PCS. But when it comes to the National Museums of Scotland, the SNP Government talk the talk but haven't walked the walk. Staff employed in the National Museums of Scotland since 1st January 2011 don't get a weekend working allowance which is paid to compensate for having to work antisocial hours. This means low-paid workers in the same shifts doing the same work are being paid up to 20% less than their colleagues. Our members who don't get the weekend allowance earn as little as £900 a month. In Edinburgh, for some members, most of that is taken up for paying their rent. Management have taken away £3,000 a year from their new staff. What is happening to the low-paid staff in the museums is symptoms of a wider problem you heard yesterday from PCS about the fiddle to pay less than the full annual living wage. National Museums of Scotland are one of the employers who use the fiddle, costing the lowest paid over £200 a year, on top of the £3,000 new staff are losing. Visit Scotland pay £1,000 less than the annual living wage figure set out by Scottish Government, and Sports Scotland have withheld half of their annual progression payments, again hitting the lowest paid hardest. The culture and sports sector are the poor relations when it comes to pay, and PCS will campaign for fairness for all workers. Museum staff will not tolerate the two-tier workforce. Such shameful anti-worker policies should be left in the past. Top of the league for visitor attractions in Scotland, but bottom of the league for industrial relations. The current dispute is now 18 months old. PCS members have been forced to take strike action, and most recently on Thursday and Friday of last week, and have mounted various and numerous demonstrations and actions to get our message out to the public. Our members are as determined today as they were on day one. Members who receive weekend allowance stand on picket lines beside their colleagues who don't get that allowance. There is a simple message to Nicola Sturgeon, John Swinney and Fiona Hislop, the Minister with direct responsibility for this. You can settle this dispute with £200,000. This is a tiny proportion of the Scottish Government's underspend last year, and is a small amount when compared to the fact that National Museums of Scotland are worth more than £60 million to the Scottish economy. When it comes to the big ticket items, the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, they've talked the talk. When it comes to the real lives, the real hardship faced by our members in the museums, can they walk the walk? Pay up for low-paid public servants, reinstate the weekend allowance, be fair to workers.
Colleague, time up.
Please support the motion.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the vote. General Council supporting. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Before I introduce Brian Campfield, we're proposing to take motions 21, 22 and 23 after Brian has spoken. There's not really an awful lot of time to debate Comp D. It's an important debate, and we don't want to stifle the debate on it, so we'll sort of put it back a wee bit. So if movers and seconders of 21, 22 and 23 can be ready, that would be great. Thank you. Now it's great to welcome Brian Campfield, Vice President of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, to our Congress. Brian is the General Secretary of the Northern Ireland Public Service Alliance, NIPSA, the largest trade union in Northern Ireland, with over 45,000 members employed across the civil and public services. Brian has been a full-time trade union official since 1982 and held previous appointments as NIPSA's Deputy General Secretary, Assistant General Secretary and Assistant Secretary. He has negotiated in and across the public sector areas such as housing, education, local government and civil service. He was elected as General Secretary of NIPSA with effect from February 2010. He has been Secretary and President at different times during the 1980s, 1990s and 2000s, the Belfast and District Trade Union Councils. Brian, Rostrum's yours.
Thank you very much, President, for that introduction. And I'd like to convey the warm fraternal greetings from the Irish Trade Union Movement to the Scottish Trade Union Movement and to this conference which is taking place over these few days. And can I say that there has been a long time cooperation between the two congresses, between the Irish Congress of Trade Unions and the Scottish TUC, and not least, brothers and sisters, in the last 5 years, when very shortly after the coalition government at Westminster was formed, both the Scottish TUC and the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, along with the Welsh TUC, took an initiative to really force the devolved governments into publicly opposing the austerity agenda and the public sector cuts agenda of the Lib Dem Conservative coalition. And we had a joint statement as a result of that from the three First Ministers and the Finance Ministers of the three devolved areas, basically stating that the cuts were bad for the economies of the devolved areas and that the cuts were bad for the people of the devolved areas. And I think it's a tribute to Peter Bunting of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions and to Graham Smith, your own General Secretary here in Scotland, that this important initiative took place and happened. And while they made those statements, there is a big question mark over what they actually done about it. And that's a completely different question that has to be addressed. But there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity now, particularly with the potential of a hung government at Westminster, and you will know, you'll be more aware than anyone else of the potential that minority parties, which represent people in different devolved jurisdictions, could have over the governance of the whole of the UK post the election. And it's an opportunity, I think, that the trade union movement has to seize, and that we have to put pressure on all the various political parties to take a position that they will not support any new government formation which doesn't call a halt to public expenditure cuts and to the whole austerity programme that has been taking place over this last number of years. There is a view, and there's some legitimacy in it, that the power of local administrations is limited because of the reliance on the block grant, and that the real battle has to take place at Westminster. And I think that there is a big element of truth in that. The reality is that we're faced with devolved administrations which in essence are having to manage a budget that's given to them to the best of their ability, and inevitably that takes us into conflict with them, and that's just a fact of political life, so it is. And we have a responsibility to defend the interests of working class people and trade union members. Could I make just a brief comment about, I know you have a big debate about devolving more powers or getting independence or whatever else. People may not be acutely aware of this, but in Northern Ireland there are some powers devolved which aren't devolved in Scotland and Wales. We have, for instance, complete control in Northern Ireland
over the social security budget, and therefore over welfare reform. And those of you who will pay closer attention to what happens in Northern Ireland will know that there is a political crisis because there is no agreement about how to implement the welfare reform measures that are taking place in Britain. In other words, despite it being a UK government or British government initiative, it still requires legislation to be introduced in the Northern Ireland Assembly for the welfare reform measures to be introduced in Northern Ireland. And that has basically caused a political crisis, which, among other things, has the potential of actually collapsing the devolved administration. And it's been the campaign of the trade union movement in Northern Ireland on opposition to welfare reform that has really brought the government or the administration to that crisis point. You will also know, well, on that particular point, and I know people are arguing that you should have further devolved power over these measures in Scotland. Part of the difficulty in this relates to this sort of axis between Westminster and the devolved regions. If we don't implement the welfare reform, in other words, if it costs more money to administer a better welfare reform system, then the block grant, which goes to Northern Ireland through the Barnett formula, is actually rated and robbed by the Westminster government. So the cost of not implementing welfare reform is then deducted and subtracted from the block grant, which means that the cuts will then be made in some other part of the public sector. There's another area I think which is important to recognise, and it's somewhere that I know you are considering and you have demands. The whole issue of employment law is devolved in Northern Ireland. Some of you will not know that we do not have fees for tribunals in Northern Ireland. And the increase in the qualification period from 1 to 2 years for being able to take a case of unfair dismissal didn't happen. We still have the 1 year qualification period, and we don't have fees. And that's the devolved matter. And the reason that we don't have those particular provisions, negative provisions for workers, is because the trade union movement campaigned and lobbied and fought with the Northern Ireland Executive and the devolved administration not to implement those. Now, we're likely to get the reduction in the consultation period for collective redundancies is likely to be reduced. We still have 90 days. It's likely we're going to have a fight to stop it being reduced to the 45 days, which you have in Great Britain. But again, there is an example of how if you have more power devolved, you have more control over decisions which are taken. And I understand that there's been a 75% or so reduction in the number of tribunal cases that have been taken in the UK as a result of the requirement now for people to pay a fee. So those are something which may have interest you. One of the big issues, and you have it on your agenda, is the whole issue of the transatlantic trade and partnership, the TTIP. If there's ever an issue when you hear politicians, whether they're devolved or national, talking about democracy and talking about decision makings, if there's ever an issue, I think, which highlights the weakness of the sort of democracy that we have, is the whole issue of these trade agreements, where you have additional measures which allow transnational companies and big business to actually sue governments for policy decisions that they may take and which they think are in the interest of their population. I think it highlights and exposes the sort of the lack of democracy or the poor democracy which exists in many Western countries. And I'll just give you an example. Some of the delegates who may well be Unite members may well know that there was the Japan Tobacco, which just took a decision like that to move to another cheaper part of the European Union, Poland, to produce its tobacco, Japan Tobacco. Up sticks with a loss of 900 jobs in a small area, in an area of Northern Ireland which has been historically dependent upon those jobs. And the damage that has done not only to the workforce, but to the local community as well, and to the local economy. And yet, who ever heard tell of workers or a local community being able to sue a big company because of the decisions that those companies have taken, which caused devastation in local communities and workforces? It's unheard of. You may be able to sue companies over environmental damage, but there's no perception or prospect of being able to sue a company over an economic decision which causes havoc and devastation in local communities. And I think that's an example of the inequality that exists between capital and labour. And that's why TTIP and those types of trade agreements have to be opposed. But that imbalance is really an imbalance of power. And I think what the job of the trade union movement is to rebuild the power of the trade union movement and ordinary working people. Because all the provisions that we have in relation to public services and social security, in relation to pensions, are all there because of the work and the struggles that our predecessors were involved in, and because they were able to wield that bit more power in order to gain concessions. And with the reduced power of the trade union movement and ordinary people, what we have had up till now, by way of public services and a reasonably decent social security system, will be taken away unless we are able to rebuild our power and the power of ordinary working class people. We need to readjust that unequal balance, that imbalance that exists between capital and labour. And the first place we need to do that is by building the strength and the power of trade unions. I think it was Ed Miliband who said yesterday about you can make a difference and you can vote in a government which is going to implement policies which are more favourable to working people. There's a story, I think it's in a book called Rules for Radicals, and an agitator, an organiser, and trade union organiser, labour organiser in the United States gives the example whenever F.D. Roosevelt got elected in the 30s, and some campaigners came to see him and said, "Look, now that you're the president, are you going to implement our demands?" And they explained what his demands were, and he said, "I agree with you." He said to them, "Well, what you have to do is go out and make me do it." So even if you do get a change of government, which is required, even if you do get a government which says it's committed to certain policies, we still need to do the job of organising and mobilising and making those governments implement policies which are more favourable to the trade unions and the working class people. And President Conference, I'd just like to conclude my remarks by once again thanking you and thanking Conference for the opportunity to extend the fraternal greetings of the Irish Trade Union Movement to yourselves. Your work and our work, I think, in both jurisdictions can make a real difference, and I wish you the best of luck and success for the remainder of the conference and in the next year ahead. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Brian. I know I said 3 motions, but depending on how quickly we get through them, because we've got another guest speaker before lunch, we'll sort of play it by ear. So I'm going to call motion 21 first, hyperlocal media, to be moved by NUJ, and I hope the seconder's there as well. Thank you.
Congress, Madam President. In moving this motion, I'm not going to read it out. After last night's well-refreshed setting of the world to rights, I think some of the terminology might defeat me and send you to sleep. But I will try and tell you what it's about. It's about ensuring that at local level we retain a diversity of media, print, broadcast and online, which reflects local interests, local priorities, and is rooted in and influenced by the communities and the people that it serves. Not like the monoculture which dominates our national media, not like the ownership of everything that we read or view on the television by individuals who have their own agenda. Not like the startling account we heard from Beck to earlier this morning about the piece-by-piece privatisation by the back door of the BBC. This motion is about trade unions working with the people in their communities to empower them, and at the same time to introduce them and develop within them the values and the agendas of trade unionism. It's about encouraging community and cooperative ownership, control and accountability of the media. Here in Scotland, the NUJ and its members have already engaged in several projects offering practical advice, training and support from experienced freelance journalists to develop the quality and the impact and the collective power of citizen journalism. We've re-established links between communities and local titles which are under threat, and in the process help to grow the readership and therefore save the jobs of our members who work on these titles. We've supported the setting up of media links through community and cooperative ownership in places as far apart as Barra and in Whitinch in Glasgow via Dumbarton. But to expand this and to ensure that we build a robust, accountable, diverse media which empowers, informs and gives real influence and power to the people, instead of using the media to control and subvert their interests, we need the support of Congress. And we need the support, too, of individual trade unions and trade unionists who are here today. What we're asking Congress to agree to do is to lobby Ofcom to broaden their work initiated under their 2012 Communications Market Review, to work with the media unions, academics and practitioners to review local media as part of their role in measuring plurality, and where possible to encourage, this is where I get stuck with the wording, hyper-local and community media hubs to work with the NUJ to help journalists displaced by redundancy to play a bigger part in managing and training people up to as high a standard as possible. And we want Congress further to agree to support talks with BBC Scotland to encourage cooperation and to help build stronger relationships with local people producing news and furthering the news agenda. There's a role for all of us to play in this, and it's important for all of us, because I don't think there's anybody in the hall who would agree that the media agenda has been taken over and is not driven either by us as trade unionists or by the people in our communities that we want to influence. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Pauline. Seconder.
President Congress, Natasha Gerson, Equity, seconding motion 21. Equity fully supports the NUJ's aims here. We're also behind the NUJ's proposed training project, already piloted successfully and funded by Skills Development Scotland, which will involve at least 12 Scottish schools, their pupils and teachers, in high-level journalism training, with a view to encouraging new career paths for young people in their local media. NUJ tutors will work with the students on essential writing and interview processes, with the admirable aim of opening the door to work experience, followed by access to the NUJ's modern apprenticeship in digital journalism. In other words, opportunities for young people to participate in the business of local newspapers radio stations or with the growing number of community media hubs. This will be driven by the NUJ, reinforcing union connections with the Scottish media industry and spreading trade union ethics while providing proper pay rates and protection for the trainees and apprentices. We are calling on Congress for support in expanding this project, in which expanding communication is the key, an aim central to the NUJ, Equity and our sister unions. STUC training has been a major success. Our unions have benefited greatly from it. Now we need to demand further help from bodies like Ofcom and the BBC to further pursue this great success story. Please support.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on this motion? Okay, I'm going to move to the vote. General Council supporting. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Colleagues, we're running really tight for time, and I do see there's quite a queue of speakers for the next couple of motions. So I'm actually going to bump you back so that we can have the guest speaker, and we'll take you later on. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but unfortunately time is of the essence. I'm now going to ask, I've welcomed Sheila Bearcroft to the platform. Sheila Bearcroft is the President, MBE, I hasten to add, President of the Wales TUC. She's Regional President of the GMB Wales and South West region. She's been an active member for over 40 years, firstly with the National Union of Tailors and Garment Workers Union, and then in 1991 when the GMB merged with the NUTGWU. She has held numerous other roles within the trade union movement, including President of the National TUC in 2008, and was awarded the MBE for her services to trade unionism in 2009. She's been an active member of the Wales TUC for many years and a General Council member, executive member, and various other committees. Sheila is currently President of the Wales TUC and continues in her term of office until May 2015. Apart from being a very good friend of mine who I met through the equality structure or the GMB, Sheila is a widower like myself with 3 children and grandchildren. Sheila, the rostrum is yours.
Cynhadledd, friends, June. It's a privilege to offer the Wales TUC fraternal greetings to your Congress today. Since the recession, we've all seen how ruthlessly the UK government has robbed working people of their wages and the young people of their opportunities in a merciless drive to ensure that working people pay the price for a crisis they did nothing to cause. We didn't cause it. It was the friends of David Cameron, those multi-millionaire bankers that caused this. In Wales, the cost of this has had a devastating impact on our members. 1 in 4 workers in Wales are now paid less than the minimum wage. Since 2010, Welsh workers are, on average, £40 per week worse off. That means average pay has fallen by over 8% since 2010. Brutal attacks to welfare have also seen our economy lose out on a staggering £1 billion per year. That's £1 billion that the Welsh Assembly doesn't have to help out the working people and those that need welfare assistance within Wales. And let's be direct about those claims that new jobs have delivered economic security. What a bald-faced lie. Low-paid, part-time, and some of them zero-hour contracts, aimed mostly at women, but now we find that men have to take low-paid, part-time, zero-hour contracts. And they've created jobs, colleagues. The majority of the new jobs created since 2010 do just not offer hours and pay people need to build a life and to support a family. In 2014, we spoke to people right across Wales as part of the Decent Jobs Week campaign to expose exactly what has happened to working life within Wales. An Amazon worker approached our stall to explain the sheer exploitation he faced when working at their huge facility in Swansea. He told us that he'd seen fellow workers docked half a day's pay for being 2 minutes late, and how the casual practice of unfair dismissal was a daily occurrence. Bullying and harassment is the order of the day in this miserable workplace that is turning back the clock on employment rights. The sad news is that more and more people are turning to these workplaces desperate for work, and under this government, and as decent jobs have become few and far between, dignity at work is harder to protect. Workers in Wales and in Scotland know this all too well. The number of temporary jobs in Wales has risen by nearly 30% since 2008. Over the same period, the number of people who are self-employed but work only part-time in Wales has nearly doubled, from 33,000 to 60,000. To make matters worse, the number of permanent jobs has fallen by 25,000. At the same time, austerity has guaranteed giveaways to the wealthiest few. The Chancellor's logic does not change one bit. Here is a government that believes you fix a broken economy by making the rich richer and the poor poorer. The bedroom tax is the most shameful example of this nasty mantra. Over 35,000 people in some of our most deprived communities have been made worse off as this policy pushes powerless people into arrears and out of their family homes. And this mad, bad, ugly attacks don't stop there. The notion of a public service, that motivates our members is treated by contempt with this coalition government. This was made blindingly obvious last year when the Prime Minister capped off a cynical and baseless attack on our Welsh NHS by describing the border between Wales and England as a line between life and death. Perhaps he was just a little afraid that Carwyn Jones just wasn't listening to him. And Carwyn hasn't cut our NHS, and he hasn't cut the budget on education. And perhaps a man that will stand up to him, which we've got now, when you could see it yesterday, might make a hell of a difference. Wales TUC unions issued a joint statement denouncing such attacks, and our members made the movement proud in stepping up to the fight. We have fought to keep the Welsh NHS true to its values. which has meant no privatisation in Wales. That makes the service a target for those who have never believed in its principles. In this battle, our services, our movement shows the power we have when united, and the platform we can give to those who need us to win. Sarah Grinter, a young Unison member and a rep who bravely spoke out in our campaign. Sarah works as a medical secretary, providing crucial communication work between the consultants and other NHS colleagues, but more crucially to families in the most sensitive circumstances. The pride Sarah has in her service to the NHS is inspired by the intense care she received when suffering from anorexia. You can see Sarah's moving story on our YouTube channel, where she describes how recent attacks on the Welsh NHS have damaged morale and, even worse, damaged the trust some patients have in the service they receive. Sarah and the thousands like her are proving that Nye Bevan was right when he declared that the NHS will last as long as there are folk with the faith to fight for it. Well, I think Nye is spinning in his grave at what this coalition government has done to it. But we will keep fighting, Nye, tooth and nail, for our NHS. Friends, colleagues, despite the fight we face for our services, wages and welfare at a UK level, trade unions in Wales have continued to win concrete victories by working in partnership with the Welsh Government. Having won the case to outlaw firms guilty of blacklisting from winning public contracts, we have this year gone further in the construction sector, colleagues. Working with the Welsh ministers, our affiliates ensured that umbrella companies are banned from all infrastructure projects. Since then, new guidance has also been sent to all public sector bodies, further in tackling false self-employment via the ethical procurement. And we are doing more to support young people. After the UK government slashed the Future Jobs Fund, the Welsh government introduced Jobs Growth Wales, which has provided 6 months' work placements for over 15,000 young people, ensuring that they get the chance they need to get started in a working life. Unite and GMB have also supported the Welsh Government in delivering wage subsidies to support former employ workers, which has delivered over 220 jobs to those so brutally abandoned by the UK Government. Wales TUC has also fought successfully to reinstate the two-tier work code in Wales, helping to resist privatisation. Above this work sits our overall push for a One Wales public sector. Our affiliates are leading the way in making the case for a system that delivers redeployment and training across our public services to ensure that the skills and experiences of the workforce is protected and redundancies are avoided through better management. On the economy, our campaign for industrial strategy echoes the statements in your motions to this your STUC Congress. Despite our victories on the shop floor and in some important sectors, we know that real security for our members comes from a long-term vision that delivers good jobs with real development opportunities. Friends, this is just a snapshot view of the work we are doing in Wales, and I look forward to hearing the rest of your Congress. And June, with just a moment's indulgence, and can I speak now, not as Sheila Bearcroft, TUC President, but as Sheila Bearcroft, GMB member. I get really annoyed when I have to sit and listen to Leanne Wood say, Leanne Wood, Plaid Cymru, the party of Wales. Well, let me tell you, it's not. It's Plaid Llafer in Wales, because Labour will return their MPs back to Parliament. And please God, a good, strong Labour government to lead us out of this mess that the Tories have got us into. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.
Right, colleagues, you're all getting very restless. That concludes the morning session. Usual number of Friends meetings on. Feel free to go on. I would encourage you to go on to some of them. There's a bucket collection on behalf of the Scottish Pensioners Forum. And here we've just finished a wee bit late, still back here for 2. Thank you.